And then I'll mention one other thinker you're going to meet this week. I think that it's also important. That, by the way, what I've done is, right, I want you to feel this thought. This conversation's been going on for thousands of years, right? This is a conversation that has been going on for thousands of years before you were born, and it will be going on for thousands of years after you've died. And you and I get to participate in that conversation, and we may even get to have an insight into its structure and where, how it operates. But I'm putting all of that conversation into 40 days. Right? It's 40 days, and I want to immerse you in it. And so each week, you are immersed in a shape of theism or a shape of atheism. And I want each week you to be immersed in a mature form of that shape. But it could be, there's hundreds of people I could have chosen. Each week, so many, but I've just chosen ones that I think will help you. And the idea is, I really hope that you're able to, ideally it would be great if you could take an hour a day, but I know for most of us that's utterly impossible. Don't worry about that. But I want us to be able to every day immerse ourselves in the shape of theism or the shape of atheism that is that week. Now, you don't have to do them in order. You can do whatever is within the week. You can do it in any order you want that works for you. But each week should be done in order, right? Don't jump ahead. The people I've picked are just representatives of that mature shape. But some of them won't work for you. Some of them you'll read and you won't like. But I encourage you to try to walk in the shoes of the shape of theism or atheism that is of that week. So Jean Meslier, again, I picked for that particular reason. I also picked those ancient philosophers, Protagoras, Epicurus, Seneca, to really show how these critiques are at the very beginning of the journey of philosophy. But also then Anthony Flew. I picked Anthony Flew because, funnily enough, this is an article. Anthony Flew is a fascinating guy, right? Because I don't know if you know the story, but one of the most famous kind of analytic philosophers who was an atheist of the kind of late 20th century. So he's very famous, very well known philosopher of religion in the analytic world. And he was a very famous and outspoken atheist. Not aggressively or anything like that, very well spoken, well educated man, but critiqued classical theism. And near the end of his life, he wrote a book with an intelligent design person, and it looked like he kind of was affirming the existence of the God that he'd been fighting all his life. And it's very controversial because he was doing this when he was very elderly, and to be honest, it looked like he was suffering from cognitive decline. And actually, I have a friend who is a journalist. He was a philosopher and then became a BBC journalist, and he interviewed Anthony Flew at this time. And he said to me, the BBC, we couldn't put the interview out because he didn't make sense. He didn't make sense because he was super smart. He just couldn't structure an argument. So there's this really interesting debate, if you want to look at it, of what did he go to some sort of intelligent design kind of deist type of position at the end of his life, or was he manipulated at the end of his life? So anyway, that's beside the point. That's just a little fun story. But Anthony Flew wrote this very short paper on falsification, and it's the most famous, maybe not now, this is pre the internet, but it was the most read critique of theism in existence, right? It was like translated into 20 languages. It was massive. And it starts off with a parable a parable that was, I think, penned by a guy called John Wisdom. But I think this is probably why it was so popular, is it's an academic philosophy paper, but it starts with this really good little parable and then uses that. And I like parables, you know that. So I've given you the parable, and I won't go into it in detail, but basically it's two people arguing about a gardener. They find this patch of clear land in a forest, and one of them thinks a gardener tends the patch And another says, no, it's just the way it is. It's just kind of how nature has designated this. And then the first person says, no, it's definitely a gardener. I said, well, I can't see any gardener. And the person says, well, they're an invisible gardener. And I go, okay, well, let's put up some fences to see if we can kind of like, stop this gardener. I go, oh no, the gardener can walk through fences. Oh, let's get some dogs and they can sniff the gardener out. Oh no, the gardener has no scent. And eventually the person says, well, what's the difference between your invisible gardener and no gardener at all? And I wanted to finish the week with that because I think it's a very good example of how a shape of theism generates, grows, becomes mature, but it becomes mature at a cost, and the ultimate cost is its own death, right? So it kind of like answers questions, it becomes more sophisticated, and that's what, so every little attack on the theism, right? Every atheistic attack makes the theism stronger, right? The theist reacts to that, the system grows, it becomes stronger and stronger. But then at the very zenith, at the very moment of the success of that form of theism is its failure. It ultimately then completely collapses into something else. And I think that's what Flew captures. I think maybe this is why it's so important as a piece of writing, is I think it's kind of like going, okay, classical theism has battled atheism and its negations, battled it really well, but it's battled it so much that it's lost everything of value. Everything that it valued ultimately has fallen to pieces and it's done. So you're going to end with that parable, and hopefully the week will have helped you feel the death blow. And it's not even that you believe it's really dead, you don't have to believe it, but just you feel that death blow, you feel that critique. And if you really feel that in your bones, then the next week, which will be the negation of negation, you will kind of get a real sense for how that negative critique becomes an affirmation and becomes something positive, becomes a new shape of theism that will kind of generate and become bigger.